Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Create 2020. I'm going to trust that you did the day one working whatever way is effective and useful and was fun for you. Simple is completely fine. The beauty of this program is that you can do it in any way that works for you, to any degree that works for you, and you can do it more extensively if you want. I know I had a good time. I got to play with a couple of people on the Zoom call, and I did some work on my own. I revisited a few times. We did some back and forth on the Facebook group. So thank you so much to people who threw out what they were thinking about, who put down what they were thinking about, who posted. If you're not following along live, it's totally fine. Any way you do this program is completely fine. So if all you're doing is thinking about it, if you're listening to a snippet here and there, if you're reading a post, all good. And so I print it out and then I come back to it over the course of days. So I'll think about it, I'll write, I'll add some more. But for the purposes of this program, basically the last 4 days were about learnings from the year, about thinking back on the important events that happened, what were the understandings. And I know there were a couple of things that came up, especially for me, around the idea of what is it that I'm going to be leaving behind in 2019? What am I willing to let go of? Because for me, like for many of you, 2019 was kind of a big pivotal year. And there's probably good reasons for that that are beyond my esoteric understanding. But what I know is that for me, lots happened. There was a lot of change, a lot of growth, a lot of understanding, and there's a lot that needs to be left behind, a lot that needs to be said. Thank you very much. So that was one of the most pivotal parts of the day one work for me this year, is recognizing what it is I'm leaving behind in 2019. But now that we've done that, we get to start to create 2020. And the way that I've planned day 2 is fairly simple and fairly straightforward. It's not going to be a lot of work, but it's kind of central work. And the idea is, if you've already printed out the worksheet, we're going to be looking at values and also life orientation. So if you didn't print it out yet, please do. There is a cover page, but you don't need to print the cover page out, so you can just print the second, third, and fourth pages. And the first 2 pages are about identifying your values. The course of your life will be impacted by what's most important to you, what's central to who you are. And we all have different values that are central to us. So it may be that you already know what your values are. I know, because I've done this work for 2 decades, the same values come up over and over again. Sometimes they might change a little bit in form. I might pick one that's a little more, articulated in a different way. But there's some central values that keep coming up over and over for me. If you have never identified what your core values are, then this will be a really interesting and fun and fairly simple and straightforward, and it won't take too long. So I've made a little list of all of the core values I could think of, the ones that are important to me. And the first thing to do is just simply go through the list and underline any of the values that you think are important to you, that just jump out as, yeah, that's important. I don't know how many there are here, but just quickly go through. It should take you 10, 15 minutes. Underline anything that's important. And for example, acceptance. Is acceptance important to me as a broad general value? Yeah. Okay, so underline it. Accomplishment. Yep, that's important. Underline it. Acquisition. I don't feel like acquisition is the most important thing for me, so I'm going to leave it. Adeptness. That word doesn't really speak to me, so I'll leave it. Although adventure is really important to me. Underline it. So basically, go through that exercise with the list. Maybe it'll take you 10, 15 minutes. And then the next thing to do is to narrow it down a little more. So you're going to go through the list again and say, is this a core value that I'd raised to the surface as being really one of my central, most important core values? And if it is, then circle it. Ideally, I would like you to stay to about 10. If it ends up being 12 or 9, it doesn't matter. But basically, you're going to narrow it down. And then you're going to take those core values, write them on a Post-it note, and put them into groupings if you can, or leave them on their own, and see what you're left with. It may be that you have a couple of key groupings and that you can choose one core value from each of those groupings that kind of holds the rest. That if you had that one thing, you'd have the others too. And then the third part of the exercise is to write those 10 values on a Post-it note. Once you have it on the Post-it note, I like to use the big bay window in my room, and I stick my Post-it notes. It's kind of my working space up there. But if you don't have a bay window, that's fine. Use your kitchen table or your countertop or the floor. It doesn't matter. Lay your 10 values, core values, out, and then see if there are any that are related to each other, because you might find that some some are similar. For example, you might have underlined and you might have gotten to freedom and adventure. And in some way you might say, well, I think those are kind of related for me. I see freedom, what freedom means to me has an aspect of adventure. So group them and move them around until they have, they have their own groupings. Maybe there's one group with 2 values in it. And maybe there's another group with 5 values in it. And maybe there's one value that's all alone. Just see if there are groupings. And it doesn't matter if there aren't. Maybe there won't be. It just will make your challenge a little harder. If there are no groupings, then you're just going to have to say, okay, which one are the 3? If I had to pick 3 values, which would be the most important? Grouping them may well help you recognize that one value within that group speaks to many of the others. And you may be able to pick that one and say, ultimately freedom is the thing that's most important to me. I like adventure. Adventure actually is kind of a subset of freedom. So freedom is the most important thing for me. So once you have your 3 values, you're going to move on to the second sheet. And you're going to write your 3 values down on the sheet. And all I want you to do in this section, this is a little bit of a brainstorming, a little bit of an exploration, a little bit of a stream of consciousness exercise. And I just want you to, with each value, spend a little bit of time thinking about how is this showing up in my life right now? And then in the second part of the box, I didn't separate it, but you can put it all the same. They might play back and forth. How is this showing up in my life now? And how might it show up in the future? How could I expand on that? So for example, using the value of freedom, I could say, I think freedom's showing up in my life right now because I don't have a structured day-to-day job and I'm feeling free around that. I'm feeling free to live my life on my own terms. I'm feeling free to create my own work, to create my own time, to manage my time. I'm feeling freedom because I've done a little bit of a mental shift this year that gives me freedom from some of the things that were holding me back in the past. Something like that. Just think through the value that's yours and ask yourself where it's showing up. And then ask yourself how you could expand that. Where could that show up more? Where might that, how could you bring more freedom into your life? In what areas? So for me, for example, using freedom as an example, I might say, I think I associate freedom to traveling. So I think next year I really want to add a little more of the kind of travel that brings me the experience of feeling free in the world, that kind of thing. So you're going to do that for all 3 values. And that's basically just to create a texture, to create a fertile ground. It's kind of like fertilizing the soil. You're laying the richness into the texture by having done this thinking about what you value and where it's showing up already and where it could show up more. And then finally, the last exercise, if you get to it, because don't forget, you're doing this process in the way that works for you to the extent that works for you. But if you feel like it's kind of a little bonus exercise and it's basically a writing prompt, and I ask you just to fill it in off the top of your head as quickly as you can, some basic questions. And that might be, the primary focus of my life is, and whatever comes to your mind first. If a couple things come to mind, it's also okay. It's basically just to get you oriented on what is the focus right now. Better or worse, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Primary focus of my life right now is creating an independent, autonomous financial world. That might be, like that as actually is mine right now. The thing that matters most to me in the world is, people feeling free and empowered, that we live in a world of peace, that we feel connection on a daily basis. And that is all there is to day 2. So I hope you'll participate. I hope you'll play. I will be in the Zoom today at 1 o'clock, just working through my own stuff. I might even go back to doing a little more work on day 1 because it was more complicated. And I'll be there. If you would like to pop in and just hang out, bring your tea, we'll sit and chat. We can talk about this as we work. It basically is a working meeting. Do join me. And if you're not available real time, pop into the Facebook group, share your thinking, share your thoughts, share your discoveries there, get inspired by other people's thinking, and just connect and support. Because really this is all about creating a community of people who are supporting each other and inspiring each other to complete on 2019 and create an amazing 2020. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you at 1, or I'll see you on day 3, or I'll see you in the Facebook group. Mwah.